but God sees into the heart. King David's life exemplifies the divine pattern of choosing the outsider as the vessel for redemption. His early alienation, rejection by his family and mistreatment by his brothers, and his seemingly insignificant role as a shepherd, these shaped his humility and his faith and his unwavering trust in God. These qualities not only prepared him for kingship, but also made him an archetype for the Messiah, whose rise from obscurity reflects God's ultimate plan for the redemption. Excuse me. Thus we see a parallel between the Redeemers, both Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef. But it doesn't stop there. Moshe Rabbeinu, our master and teacher Moses, who was Hashem's chosen Redeemer to lead his people out of Egypt, he was also an outsider. Now, the comparison of Moshe's experience as an outsider with that of Yosef and David is admittedly not an exact one, because Moshe's youth was different. He grew up as a prince in the palace of Pharaoh, apart from his brethren. Yet, as we shall see, in many ways he fits the same archetype of the Redeemer who is separated from their people, yet ultimately rises to lead them. Midrash Rabbah states that Moses' survival as an infant was orchestrated by divine providence to prepare him as the Redeemer. His separation from his people, placed floating in the Nile and raised by Pharaoh's daughter, it was part of this divine plan. In Pharaoh's palace, Moshe was an outsider as well. The Midrash describes Moshe's dual identity in that palace, raised as an Egyptian prince, yet aware of his Israelite roots. This duality created within Moshe an internal conflict, making him an outsider in both worlds. He did not fully belong to Pharaoh's house, nor was he integrated with his own people. Moses' time in the palace was necessary to shape his ability to lead. Being apart from his people gave him a broader perspective. However, it also created an internal sense of estrangement. Chapter 2 and verse 11 in the book of Exodus reads, "Now it came to pass in those days, when Moses was grown, that he went out to his brethren and looked on their burdens." This verse marks Moses' first conscious identification with the suffering of his people, the day he went out and saw the suffering of a fellow Jew being tormented by an Egyptian taskmaster. He kills the Egyptian. His choice to go out reflects his movement from being an outsider in the Egyptian palace to aligning himself with his people, the Israelites. The Midrash emphasizes Moses' deliberate choice to identify with his brethren. It understands the phrase, "and he saw their burdens," to mean that he not only witnessed their physical suffering, but he also deeply empathized with their spiritual plight. This act of stepping into their world was transformative, but ironically, it also reinforced his status as an outsider. He was no longer at home in Pharaoh's court, but neither was he fully accepted by his people. In chapter 2 and verse 14, when Moses intervenes in a quarrel between two Hebrews, one of them retorts, "Who made you a ruler and a judge over us?" This rejection is an expression of Moses' outsider status among his own people. The Midrash comments that Moses was deeply hurt by this rejection, questioning whether he would ever be truly accepted as their leader, given his past as an outsider raised in the house of Pharaoh. But this served as a test of Moses' character and leadership potential, as he ultimately had to prove himself through his actions and dedication to the welfare of his people. And most of all, this rejection mirrors Yosef's and David's experiences, once again illustrating this theme that redeemers often face initial alienation. After killing the Egyptian, Moses flees to Midian, where he becomes an outsider once again. The Torah describes him as a stranger in Midian, where he's actually identified as an Egyptian by the daughters of Jethro in Exodus chapter 2 and verse 19. Midrash Tanchuma notes that Moses' time in Midian was part of his preparation as a redeemer. He honed the quality of empathy through distance. His isolation from both Egypt and Israel allowed him to develop the humility and strength needed to lead. His separation from his people gave him the ability to empathize deeply with their suffering, while remaining detached enough to lead with vision and resolve, thus developing as a fitting vessel for divine revelation. So although Moses' experience differs greatly from that of Yosef and David, having been separated from his people and raised in an environment that was alien to his own heritage, still, his journey required him to step outside of both the Egyptian and Hebrew worlds, thus forging a unique path as a redeemer. And his initial rejection by the Israelites, followed by his exile to Midian, exemplified the theme of the Redeemer's isolation. Ultimately, like Yosef and David, Moses' rejection and isolation were part of a divine refining process to prepare him for the leadership. The outsider status is not a flaw, but a necessary feature of the Redeemer's journey. So with your heart truly open, I ask, why does Hashem choose the outsider as the vessel to be a tool for redemption? Well, firstly, humility is a prerequisite for leadership. By virtue of their struggles, outsiders develop an intense humility that fosters a deeper connection with the divine, a critical quality for true leadership. Unlike those born into power or privilege, they are acutely aware of their limitations, and rather than attribute success to their own abilities, the outsider learns to rely entirely on God. This dependency ensures that the Redeemer acts as a transparent conduit for divine guidance, without personal ambition. And the ability to empathize and connect with the disenfranchised is another quality necessary to be a true leader. Outsiders understand the pain and suffering of alienation. The divine choice of the outsider is also a demonstration of God's mastery. Choosing the outsider demonstrates that redemption is the work of God, not human power. It's through the unexpected and improbable that God reveals his mastery over the world, ensuring that redemption is attributed to his hand alone. And we know that God has a preference for the humble. The Torah repeatedly emphasizes God's closeness to the humble and lowly, as expressed in Psalms 113. He raises the poor